Hi children, welcome back to English class. In our previous class, we discussed Unit 6, Listening and Comprehension part. Now, today we are going to discuss Unit 6, Reading a grammar topic called Active Voice and Passive Voice. It's very important you to learn. Hope you are going to follow this active voice and passive voice and use our writing express while you are creative writing part and by using active voice and passive voice. Well, now let us know what is active voice and what is an passive voice. And an active voice, it's the verbs. Before I make you understand what is an active voice, verbs are said to be an active and passive. Now, for example, the verbs, if the action in a sentence, the verb is important. You know, subject plus verb plus object. Okay, that's a sentence. You know it. The verb if that action doer, the subject in a sentence, if the subject is the action doer, then you can say that the subject is active. Okay, for example, let me take one example. Let's take she. She bakes. She bakes a cake. Now let's take this one. Now what is an active voice? Let us know first. Here in this sentence, the subject is the action doer. Okay, subject is doing the action, is the doer. Okay, and see here, she is the subject and she is performing an action. Subject is performing the action. Okay, so that subject is active. She is performing the action. Subject plus verb plus object. Okay, here in this, whenever the subject is active and the subject is performing the action, that's that kind of verb you can say it as active voice. The verb is an active voice. Okay, the subject is the active and subject is the action doer here. The subject performs the action. The subject performs the action in a passive voice, in an active voice. Okay, the subject is active and the subject is the action doer. The subject performs the action in the active voice. Okay, now I hope you understood. Now in an act, the main formula is normal sentence. Almost every day we use active voice to express our ideas and beliefs and thoughts and feelings. So we are using active voice. That is normal sentence. The subject follows verb and action, then the object. Okay, so no need to discuss more about the active voice. Active voice means where subject is active and action performer and who performs the action is the doer of the action in the active voice. Now what is passive voice? In the passive voice, subject is the receiver of the action. He is not the performer. Now let me, can you see here? Now, yeah. Now let me discuss now what is the difference between passive voice and active voice. Now in this one, I said subject is inactive. I mean inactive, no, it's doer. Subject is the action performer. He is doing the action. But in passive voice, the subject is the receiver of the action. Let's take the same sentence. Now we can write like this. A cake is baked. By me also you can say, or she is there, the cake is baked by her. Now, where is the subject? Okay. Who baked the cake? Sorry, who baked the cake? Who baked the cake? That is, the subject is there. Okay. Now here we are writing reverse way. Now you know that I have brought in the passive voice. Always object comes first and subject goes last in the end. And here the subject becomes the receiver of the action. Receiver of the action. Subject becomes the receiver of the action. Here subject is the performer of the action. Got it? The difference between active voice and passive voice. See here, a cake. How can a cake do any action? It's a non-living thing. It cannot perform any action. So that subject becomes receiver of the action. A cake is baked by her. A cake is baked by her. Here the subject becomes, what is the subject in ours? A cake. Is that cake doing any action? No, it's receiving an action. How it is? The cake is receiving action by this, by her, by Usha, by someone else, by Aruna, like that. Okay? Thus, a cake is baked by Aruna, like that. Are you following my part? Now what I'm saying, are you following my point? I hope so. Now here, she is the subject and she is performing action. Here a cake is the subject. It's not doing any action. It's receiving the action. Cake is baked by whom? Baked by her. This is receiving the action by the one. Subject is a cake. It's receiving this action. Here subject itself doing the action. So you understood that the first point, that in active voice subject is the action performer. In passive voice subject is the action receiver. It cannot perform the action. Now, it may be a person even, but always in the passive voice that subject will be the receiver of the action, not the performer of the action. But in the passive voice, always the subject will be the performer of the action. The difference is we can change the sentences into active voice into passive voice. The verbs into active voice into passive voice. The thing is, you should know that you should bring the subject. Now let me show you how to change active voice into passive voice. Okay, how to form. You should bring the object as a subject, change the object, subject, verb plus object, right? And send the subject to the object place in the passive voice. That's the first rule that you have to remember. Passive means that subject is the passive here. It's not the action performer. Why are you so passive? Okay. Now we say sometimes parents come to us and they ask, how is my child? Yeah, he's active, but nowadays is looking passive in the class. It's not active in the class. It's not doing action, what he has to do. It should be done by him. That was not being done by him. So here, the subject is action performer. Here, passive. The subject becomes passive. Means not doing any action. It's not the performer of the action. Subject is not performer. Subject is receiver here. That's why it is passive voice. Means not doing anything. Here active, doing. Okay? Clarity? First thing you understood what is the difference between active voice and passive voice. Second thing, how to change active voice into passive voice. Third thing I am going to say, why should we use passive voice? Why are you explaining? Why are you discussing with us about passive voice when we could speak directly, taking the subject and action on the object? Yes, we need. When should we use a passive voice? I am going to talk. But first you know how to change active voice into passive voice. You should bring a cake. A cake is baked. Why I am using this? Because in the place of bakes, I am using is baked by her. Bringing, by whom the cake is being done? Who is doing this? Is being done by know, in the object place, you know, pronoun changes. Pronoun you should know. Pronouns, you know, object place, first subject you use, she is a girl. Okay? With the same she, you cannot use in the object, in the sentence. You should use her, him, them. You know, it remains same in the subject and object. Okay? And now I gave a chalk piece to shear to her. I is the subject. Gave verb a chalk to. Chalk is subject, I know. Chalk to her, not to she. You cannot use she pronoun in the object place. You should use her pronoun. Pronoun her in the object place. Are you catching my point? Now let's go with this one. Now you understood how to change active voice into passive voice. Now why I have used this? This is the formula for this passive voice. Now this I'm going to discuss with you later. What you have to fix in your mind is the first thing, rule is, if you want to change active voice into passive voice, bring the object in the subject place in the passive voice. In the passive voice, bring the object into subject place and set the subject to the object place in the passive voice. Clear? Yes, I hope clear, because when we go on discussing all the rules of why ma'am has changed bakes into is baked, I have changed it into passive voice because this is not the action doer, that's why. That's why this is the receiver, action receiver. Subject is not doing any action. Passive it is, okay? So now let's go with why should we use passive voice, ma'am? Okay, why should we use in creative part and this part, that part? Why do we need passive voice in English language? Why again this? Okay, we use passive voice when we don't know the subject, who did the action. Suppose, let me take one example. The cave paintings. The cave paintings was made by. The cave paintings was made. Why we don't know. Who did the cave paintings? We don't know. In the Stone Age, in the old Stone Age, people did. We don't know particular name. We don't have any idea. The cave paintings started in the Stone Age. So when the subject, the action performer, the actor is not known to us, then we should use passive voice. Bring the object, that is, cave paintings was made in the Stone Age, in the old Stone Age. See, when the subject is unknown, when the actor means the subject, okay, is unknown, the particular subject and actor, the action performer name, whoever it may be, we don't know, then we could use passive voice. In such situations, we can express our beliefs and ideas in passive voice. Are you following me? I hope so. So, when the actor or subject is unknown, I said example. I said one example, that is, cave paintings was made in the Stone Age, in the old Stone Age. Let me write this. The cave paintings was made in the Stone Age, old Stone Age. We know that in Stone Age we did it. Stone Age means, you know, it's Stone Age, that all Golden Age, that all you know, no, right? In social subject you have right. The old age, okay? That period cave painting started. So, when you don't know the actor, who did it, who started it, who invented it, then unknown, the actor or subject is unknown, then you could use passive voice. Then how could you say dash made the cave paintings? Can you say like that? You don't know who did it. Okay, so that's why the cave paintings was made in the Old Stone Age. When the subject or actor is unknown, you could use passive voice. Now, do you catch my point? Now, why should we use passive voice in English language? Hope you understood. Now, let's go with the next point. When the subject or actor is irrelevant. If you don't want, now let me erase this one and let me take now here when the action the actor or subject, when the subject or actor means action performer, not film actor again here. Okay, action performer. Don't take direct meaning, literal meaning don't go. Okay, literal meaning means direct meaning of something, not literal meaning. I'm not talking actor means only film actor, don't think action performer here. Okay, and subject, that is actor, is irrelevant. Is irrelevant means not important. It's not, you should not mention, it's not, who built that one, we don't know. Now let's take one example, I tell you. A power plant, now a power plant cannot perform any action, that means you should understand it's a passive voice, okay. A power plant will be, a power plant will be built, a power plant will be built in the desert. In the desert. Who is going to build? Who is going to build is not at all important. You cannot say the workers they build. You can't mention their names. The government, we know it already. Whose name? Which minister? How can he build? Is he going to build? No. So, when the subject or actor is irrelevant, then you could use this one, passive voice, your sentence. You could use your sentence. You could express your views in passive voice. You can write like, a power plant will be built in the desert. So here the power plant is a passive, not action doer, action receiver. It's taking action. Power plant is going to be receive the action by someone else. We don't know. We don't know. That's why we are using the passive voice. We don't want to mention even. It's irrelevant. It's not important. Now let's go with one more point. Where do we use again passive voice? We use passive voice. Now let me erase here. And then we are going to learn how to change active voice into passive voice in all the tenses. In all kinds of tenses we are going to use. Okay. Now the third one, that is why do we use passive voices? While speaking about scientific experiments, scientific journal, scientific experiments, okay? Science, okay, let's write as science experiments. We can go with language. Why again? Simple language, okay? Science experiments. For example, the sodium hydroxide was dissolved in the water. The sodium, like how can sodium itself do any action? Was dissolved. We are dissolving it by using and taking sodium hydroxide and putting it into water and mixing it. Now this all we are going to do, but we don't want to mention that who is going to do this all. The sodium hydroxide was dissolved or is dissolved in the water like that. Are you following me now? Yeah, the sodium hydroxide, you can start like this. The sodium hydroxide was dissolved, was or is dissolved. You can use anything. dissolved in water. Is dissolved in water. Now see, here how you are using the sodium hydroxide was dissolved in water. This is the passive voice because sodium hydroxide is not the action performer, it's an action receiver. So while speaking and expressing the scientific experiments, we are using passive voice. And also for like when action performer or actor is irrelevant, not important to mention, and when we don't know, unknown who did that action, then we could use passive voice for scientific experiments of general, or you can use and general truth like some facts, general truth and some facts. Actions are made to be, laws, rules are made, like some, like you can take rules or some like this, rules are made to be broken, are made to broken, are made to be broken, or you can say made to be followed. So why should again we think negative? Made to be followed. Rules are made to follow, to be followed. Sorry, to be followed. We think. Okay. Now rules are made to be broken means sometimes the people, these youngsters, they speak, oh rules, who should follow? Who is going to follow the rules? Rules are made to be broken. Actually, you can say positive rules are made to be followed. Okay, followed by everyone. Then rules here, you cannot say rules is the action performer. Then some people are going to break or people are going to follow. You can take rules are made to be followed. I want to say this kind of sentence, not broken. Rules are made to be followed is the correct one, not broken. Okay. Now you understood all that. Why should we use passiveness in English language? When the subject is unknown, when the subject is not important, irrelevant, when we are talking about scientific truth, and when we are talking about facts, some facts like this. Okay. So you understood better that what is an active voice, what is a passive voice. In active voice, the subject is the action performer, and the passive voice, the subject is the action receiver. Got it? Now, and you understood that how should we change active voice into passive voice. Now, first thing today, what I want to say is some of the tenses, in all kinds of tenses, I would like to show you how to change active voice into passive voice in all kinds of tenses. Like suppose you are talking or you want to change active voice, the present tense active voice which is in present tense, simple present. Then what is the formula for that? Remember, for all passive voice, remember and fix. For all passive voice, we are using V3. So that verb should be V3 in passive voice. In all passive voice, whatever may be the tense, present tense, past tense, present continuous, past continuous, future tense or future perfect tense or present perfect tense, past perfect tense, future perfect tense. Whatever it may be, we are going to change, whenever we change active voice, whatever the tense may be, but we should use for passive voice V3. Got it? V3. V3, you let me remember, drink, drank, we do drunk is the V3. Now let's take one example. Now let's change first simple present, active voice into passive voice. Now let's do some tenses today. Changing active voice into passive voice. Okay, now let's go with first and formula, along with formula. Active voice. Now how you have learned direct and indirect speech, you have learned present tense into present tense. How to change direct sentence which is in present form, simple present, into indirect speech. Okay, in the same way, the simple present active voice into passive voice. Direct, indirect. In that way, passive, active voice and passive voice. Okay. Now let's go with this passive voice. Okay. Now, first, let's take always simple present. Okay. Now let's go with the simple present. And While changing this, you should know the formula. Passive voice. While changing active voice, which is in simple present, and changing into, forming into passive voice, you should know the formula. Okay? First, John writes. V5 we should use write, simple present. John writes or I write. Both I show you now. You should understand. John writes a letter. John writes a letter. Okay? And I write a letter. Both let us see how should we change into passive voice. First, John, same. Both are simple present. You know, in simple present formula, the verbs changes according to the subject. If the subject is I, you, we, they, then the formula is, the verb is V1. I write a letter, you write a letter, they write a letter, we write a letter. But if the subject is he, she, it are person's name like Rajni, Raju, like that, then you should use V5. She writes a letter, he writes a letter, it writes a letter, John writes a letter, Raju writes a letter, Rajni writes a letter. Got it now? Yes, this you should know, simple present. That's why how to change simple present active voice into passive voice. Now the formula is, you should bring first subject into object into subject place, subject to a object place. You know this one, reverse. Got it? Now first let's start with, first rule is we should start with the object. With the object of the active voice becomes the subject of the passive voice. Are you following me? Let us be slow, no problem. The object of the active voice becomes the subject of the passive voice. Reverse. The object comes to the subject place, subject goes to the object place. Now let's go with this one. Now first let's change a letter. A letter. Now you should use for present is and is are. Any one you should, according to the subject, first is and is are, okay, plus V3 is the formula for passive voice in the present tense. Okay, if you find active voice in present tense, to change it into passive voice, am or is or are. Anyone you should take, not three. Anyone, see the subject. Now, a letter, am you cannot write, is. A letter is, first change, bring the object into subject. Then take this formula, use this formula. Now, how should you use am or is or are? See the subject. If they is there, then they are. Are because plural. If I is there, I is you can't write I am. I am. Okay? Now, a letter is, now what is the word? This one, verb, right. Now, what should you write? What should you change in passive voice? V3. What is the V3 of write? Write, wrote, written. Written is the V3 of write. Okay, so write V3. That is written. A letter is written by bring the subject of the active voice becomes the object in the passive voice. That's it. Written by John. Hope you understood now. First one, it takes time. The second tense you understand easily. Okay. Subject you should send to the, first object of an active voice becomes subject of the passive voice. And subject of the active voice becomes the object of the passive voice. And in the present tense, while changing into passive voice, and is or are plus V3 according to the subject. You should take this one. Now, have you understood? Now, let's go with this one. Now, first, I write a letter. Okay? A letter. Object becomes a subject now in the active voice. A letter. A letter. Now a letter again is the verb form helping. Okay. Then V3. Written. Again written. A letter is written by me. By I you cannot use. What is object? Object pronoun of I. Object pronoun of I is me. Object pronoun of she is her. Object pronoun of he is him. They is them. That you should know very well. Okay, now I don't want to dump on you more and more on very first day of this active voice and passive voice video class. Okay, now let us end up with this present tense, simple present form today. The next video we are going to learn how to change active voice into passive voice of other tenses. Hope you have enjoyed and understood and followed how to change active voice and passive voice, and what is active voice and passive voice, and why should we use passive voice in English. And that's all for today's video. Bye bye for now. Have a nice time.